This presentation will focus on a poem titled "The Road Not Taken." The author of this poem is Robert Frost. He was born March 26th of 1874 in San Francisco. His father, William Prescott, died from tuberculosis when he was 11 years old. After graduating from college, he tried a variety of jobs, including working as a teacher, cobbler, and even an editor. In 1895, he married Eleanor White and moved to England. His writing style is very traditional and is associated with life and landscape of New England. Although he uses very traditional verse forms and metrics, his language that he uses is quite modern. This is a brief video on the history of Robert Frost.
Robert Frost is one of the most widely read and beloved American poets, as well as one of his greatest.
Four-time Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, Robert Frost was a national celebrity, famous for writing poems about rural life using American colloquial speech.
Robert Frost is well known for a few poems that he managed to lodge in everyone's head. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, also Mending Wall, and The Road Not Taken, of course, is probably the most famous of all of his poems.
While most people associate Robert Frost with New England, he was born in San Francisco on March 26, 1874, and he moved to New England at age 11 after the death of his father.
Frost began writing poetry in high school, where he met his future wife, Eleanor White. He briefly attended Dartmouth, then went to Harvard in 1897, but left before graduating due to illness and his wife's pregnancy. After Harvard, Frost took up farming.
During this time, he lost two children to influenza, and he wasn't a very good farmer. The farm did not thrive, but his work thrived.
While Frost was able to get a few poems published, he was unable to get a book published. So in 1912, he sold his farm and took his family to live in England, hoping to find better luck with publishers.
Within a few months of arriving in England, Frost found a publisher for his poems.
The first book, A Boy's Will, was reviewed rather quickly by none other than Ezra Pound, who gave it a very favorable review.
Shortly after World War I broke out,
The Road Not Taken was published in 1916. It was actually the first poem in the collection known interval. It was considered to be narrative and autobiographical, and it was actually considered one of the most misinterpreted poems of the time. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and perhaps having the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So essentially, in the poem, the speaker is traveling in the woods and comes across two paths. After observing and trying to decide which path he should take, the speaker must choose one. He said that there were no observable differences, so he chose one without much thought. But later in the poem, he claims to have chosen the path less traveled. So the structure of this poem is, it has 4 stanzas, each of which has 5 lines. It is a lyric poem, and it contains simple language, but also has a bit of a complex meaning if you read into it. The rhyme scheme of this poem in stanza 1 is A, B, A, A, B. In stanza 2 is C, D, C, C, D. In stanza 3 is E, F, E, E, F. In stanza 4 is G, H, G, G, H. And the end rhymes are all single syllables. So as I mentioned earlier, each stanza has 5 lines. and each line has 8 to 10 syllables. This poem has what we call a loose iambic rhythm and is written with 4 feet, or a tetrameter. It provides readers with an unsettled, questioning mood. So the tone of this poem, or how the author feels towards his writing, it seems to be somewhat inspired. He feels very optimistic about his experience. The mood that he displays, the general atmosphere created by his words, is pretty hopeful. And the main idea of this poem is decision making, because he essentially came to a point in the path where he had to make a decision. He had 2 options, one of which he had to choose. The repetition in this poem is the line, "Two roads diverged in a wood." And that relates to the main idea, because the main idea of decision making is essentially those 2 paths that one has to choose between. The alliteration that he uses is wanted where and first for. And he uses assonance to create rhythm as well. One of the themes present in this poem is youth in relation to innocence. The idea of that is when one is young, it comes with a sense of innocence in which he didn't really have any motives behind choosing the path that was taken. He was out in the woods without a map and he didn't really know which path to take, but instead of feeling lost and backing out, he just chose one and went on. Another theme present in this poem is knowledge of oneself and individualism. This connects to the previous theme mentioned too, because he trusted himself in his decision. Although he was a bit hesitant at first when he was presented with the 2 paths of which he had to choose one, after he chose the path, he didn't question it. And this relates to the next theme as well, where caution leads to commitment. He used great caution when he was choosing this path, but he also was committed to the path that he chose. The final theme I felt was present in this poem is isolation. In the beginning of the poem, he stated that the 2 paths didn't have any observable differences, but later he states that he chose the path less traveled. Now, this could be for several different reasons, but I believe that he might have been experiencing feelings of loneliness and isolation, causing him to believe he took the path less traveled. Now, for a personal connection to this poem, I actually related it to a dilemma that is currently happening and has been a dilemma for over a year. And it's actually the decision of whether or not I should continue training with my current instructor. So essentially I have 2 choices, one of which is to continue and the other is to pursue a different opportunity that has been presented to me. And unlike the speaker of this poem, I have so far been unable to make a decision, so I lack that commitment that the speaker has.